911 dispatchers of Reddit. What are some of the dumbest calls you've gotten? Kind of relevant. Worked in the Coast Guard, where one of my jobs was the same thing as a dispatcher with radios and phones and boats instead of cars to respond. One day, someone called to tell me their young daughter was just kidnapped. I asked them if their kidnapper was on a boat or near the water. They said no. The caller just didn't think it was a big enough issue to call 911, so they called the Coast Guard instead. Yeah, the Coast Guard's basically just a backup, non-emergency line for small issues, you know, like when your kids get kidnapped. I've been a dispatcher for about 7 years now, in a medium-sized county in Florida. Every year on July 4th and New Year's, we get calls about gunshots. Every single time, the caller is perfectly convinced they're gunshots and couldn't possibly be fireworks. They'll say they hear automatic weapons, or my personal favorite, rapid-fire shotguns. And every single time a deputy goes out to investigate, it turns out to be the unlikely culprit of fireworks. I had one woman call 911 to tell me she found a cell phone on the ground. That's it. Irate elderly man calls 911 while standing in the sheriff's office lobby to report the clerks not being helpful. When I told him that's not something you use a 911 line for, he went crazy, going as far as threatening to break into the office and shoot me. He was subsequently arrested. Male was arrested for domestic battery, called 911 from the backseat of the patrol car and stated he was being unlawfully imprisoned. When I told him the only thing I could do for him was to send him more deputies, he said, "No thanks," and hung up. He then proceeded to call 3 more times looking for a different answer. We told the deputies on scene. They took his phone away and added a charge of misuse of 911. And had a woman call in stating she accidentally took too much melatonin. She started getting hysterical when she felt the effects of her overdose. She was getting sleepy. Geez, I had no idea the 911 was basically just the public therapist line. Yesterday morning was a cold one in my area. Icy conditions on the roads, widespread crashes, all the good stuff. A lady calls in and complains about a suspicious substance on the road that made her car slip. She was driving too fast to see what it was, but insisted that something strange was afoot. Yeah, I guess this is what happens when you live in a place that doesn't usually get snow. Some people just don't know how to deal with it when it shows up. Too many to count. If I had to pick a favorite, I'd have to choose the time a concerned citizen called in an animal stuck in a tree. That animal was a bird. "Oh, come quick, he's stuck up really high." Oh, never mind, he flew away. Middle of the night shift. Get a report of a guy trying to ride on a moose. Officer attends. There is indeed a male trying to ride said moose. Male is wearing a high-vis vest and a helmet, which his girlfriend made him put on, for safety reasons, of course. Well, at least his sensible girlfriend is there to look after him. A lady ran over herself with her own car. She called to let us know she was okay. This was the fall of 2012. Hope she's, still doing okay. "Wow, you're never gonna believe this. I ran myself over." "Okay, do you need us to send ambulance?" No, it's okay. I just wanted to let you know. Once, my dad got a call from the 911 dispatch. At first, he was really confused because he didn't call them in the first place, and they asked, "Sir, do you have a daughter?" "Yes, why?" "Well, she just called and claimed you broke her heart." Apparently my sister got in trouble when she was about 5 or 6 and called 911 claiming, "My daddy broke my heart." She hung up in embarrassment after the dispatcher began laughing. Yeah, my cat does the same thing every time I'm 20 minutes late feeding her. Every Thanksgiving, you'll always get the person who calls because they don't know how long to cook the turkey. Never fails. Every Thanksgiving, someone always puts a frozen turkey in a deep fryer, usually in a trailer home, and a fire surprisingly occurs. People who have warrants on themselves love calling to complain and ask to see the police in person for a dispute. They don't seem to remember we look up everyone in the dispute, not just the accused. You know, it's got to be really fun to just be the general customer support for any random issue going on in people's lives. I got a call from a woman in the wee hours of the morning, clearly drunk and slurring. She says, "I want you to send an officer to my house and take me to the bar. Wait while I get drunk and then take me home." "Ma'am, I think you're looking for a taxi service." "Well, you guys suspended my license." Time passes. "Okay, I'm ready. Come and get me." "Ma'am, I already told you, we're not a taxi." "I got warrants." "Oh, well in that case." They said she fought like a prize fighter. Yeah, I guess I never thought about how easy it would be to get a ride somewhere if you just tell the police to come arrest you. I mean, you're not going to go where you want to go, but you'll get a ride somewhere. Around 3 a.m., I say, "911, do you need police, fire, or medical?" They say, "Nope, I'm calling to report there is no emergency." I say, "Okay, do you need any assistance?" They say, "No, sir, everything is good here." I say, "Okay, well, you called an emergency..." Click. "Well, I guess I'll go F myself then. Thanks, bud." Yeah, these 911 operators, all they get are just bad news calls all the time. Maybe we should just call them sometimes to let them know that everything is doing okay. I'm not a 911 dispatcher, but I'm a central station operator. I'm the lady that asks what your password is when your alarm goes off. I've been at my job for 5 years. My favorite call ever was the second call I made to the house of an old couple. Their alarm had gone off about 30 minutes prior. They weren't sure why the alarm was sounding, so they asked me for the police to be dispatched. On the second call, the wife answered the phone. She gave me all the correct information and passed the phone to the officer. The alarm was still sounding, but there was another weird beep in the background. We walked the owners through shutting their system off, but the beep was still going off. The officer was getting frustrated, and the homeowners weren't sure why the alarm was still sounding, so they wanted me to shut the alarm down. I told him that our system was shut off and the beeping wasn't from us. The officer then went looking for the sound. He found out it was their alarm clock sounding. I swear I heard him roll his eyes through the phone, and I tried my best not to laugh. He handed the phone back to the older couple, who still had no idea what was going on, but said the officer told them everything was okay. As somebody who has to help my grandparents with their tech support problems on a weekly basis, this story does not surprise me whatsoever. It's like when my grandpa called me up saying, "I'm trying to watch TV, but why do I hear music coming over the movie?" And so I walk up to the TV, listening to where the sound is coming from, and they've got a little Google Home device right next to it, and the music is coming from that, so I just say, "Google, stop music," and it shuts off. And he's just like, "Oh, well, would you look at that?" But hey, the rent is cheap and it gives me good housing security, so I can't complain. My mom was a dispatcher in Arizona after college back in the 70s, and told me a great story about a call she got. Or rather, a series of calls from an Indian man. I can't recall what the original distress call was about, but after the first call, he started calling back all the time because he thought she had a very sexy voice. She told me he would turn the charm level up to 11, trying to woo her in his thick Indian accent. Apparently, as soon as she would answer the call, his opening line was, "Hello, Control, I love you." And she'd have to hold back her laughter. I'm sorry to disappoint you, man, but I don't think that there's been very many dates ever in history that have been started thanks to a 911 call. Some lady wanted the fire department to come burn her house down because she thought a demon lived in it. I sent paramedics and police to check on her, but I told her we'd be happy to burn her house down in a controlled training capacity if she wanted to donate it. But there was a lot of paperwork to get that started. They're like, "Well, if you want to pay for it, then sure, let's do it." 911, what's your emergency? "There's a horse laying down in a field." Do you believe it is injured?" "No, it just normally stands up." "Yeah, we will have a deputy go look at it." And yes, the horse was okay. Hey, sometimes you're just a busybody and you're looking for some attention. And I'm kinda glad people like this get in trouble for this. About 2 months after the Columbine shooting, I was hanging out after school by the JROTC building at my high school. They had a drill team, but the rifles are dummy, weighted, realistic-looking rifles that can't fire and could only be used as a club. The drill team was practicing after school, and one guy missed the catch after throwing the rifle in the air. It came down and knocked him unconscious with a gash on his head. The teacher, a former Navy officer, immediately started first aid and told a student to call 911. Cell phones weren't as prevalent then, and the kid went inside the building to use the phone. Now this is the dumb part. The student, panicking, told the 911 operator that his friend was A. hit by a rifle, B. at a high school, and C. was bleeding out. SWAT got there in about 7 minutes. Sees a bunch of kids holding what appear to be rifles. Yeah, it was a mess. 1 ambulance, out of 10 sent, got there eventually after SWAT gave the all clear. The kid hit by the rifle was okay, but needed around 10 stitches, and ended up with the new nickname of Snipe. So maybe this was the first incidence of accidentally swatting somebody. Repo companies in the area report their repos to us, just in case the owner decides to try and report the car stolen. I started my shift that day, logging several, when one of the owners calls in. We take his info, confirm it matches, and let him know that it was reported as repossessed and to contact his finance company. A little while later, he calls 911 again to let us know that he paid it up to date and the address they gave him to pick up the car didn't exist, so we wanted to report it stolen. We again refer him to his finance company. A few hours later, he called 911 again. He checked his onboard GPS signal and saw it listed his car in another city, the next state over. So he had driven there and searched the city, but didn't find it, so it had been stolen. We again explain it was repoed and to continue to speak with his financial institution. The day carries on and we eventually get to the end of the shift. As we are wrapping everything up for our shift before the night shift gets in, he calls 911 again. He found the tow yard his car was stored at, but it was closed for the night. He needed us to open it for him so he could claim his car. We explained that it was a private business and the car wasn't stolen, so we can't just bust in and take his car. He will have to claim the car once they open in the morning. He was so moved by our logic that he decided to try reporting it as stolen again. You know, it does kind of make you wonder, couldn't somebody just call in ahead saying that they're going to repo a car and then just go steal it? My husband used to dispatch before he was old enough to go to the police academy. We lived in a small town, ranked 3rd most dangerous in our state. Lots and lots of drug use. There was a woman who was honestly crazy. I don't know if she had mental problems before the drugs, or if the drugs fried her brain, but she was a regular caller. Some of her calls, she called and said that she was raped. After coaxing some info out of her, she said that she knew who did it. It was her stuffed bear. Another time, she called to report a break-in because she fell asleep with her blankets wrapped around her, but when she woke up, it was bundled at her feet. She called one summer night. routinely got over 115 degrees in the summer, and said that she had walked 3 miles from her apartment and needed a ride back because she was barefoot and her feet hurt. He asked where her shoes were, and she said she was carrying them. She walked 3 miles and didn't think to put them on. Another call wasn't stupid, but still stuck with me. It was a domestic violence call, and when he asked what was going on, the woman yelled, "He threw a piping hot chicken pot pie at me." Something about her attention to detail I just thought was funny, in an unfunny situation. You know, there's something so interesting about the culture in small towns. Especially when you just have a few people who are just the designated criminals, and everyone kind of knows them and to stay away from them, and the cops just have to deal with the same few people over and over again. A guy gets his truck stuck in the mud while out doing donuts at 3 a.m. and calls for help. Tell him he needs to pay a tow truck to winch him out. The guy gets angry and claims we are leaving him stranded in the dark. Tell him we can send an officer out to check on him if the area is unsafe. Y'all got me messed up. I'm on probation and you're trying to send me back to jail. The tow truck arrives, and while trying to winch him out, the guy keeps taking off his clothes and trying to have sex with his girlfriend in the back seat of the truck the driver is working on. The tow driver leaves. The guy calls back and is now very angry that the tow driver didn't get his girlfriend a ride home. And since he's gonna fight the cops when they show up, additional officers were sent. You know, this guy's probably better off being in prison. He's much more likely to not hurt himself there. I had a woman call 911 to ask if it was legal to sell a baby. I had a guy call to report information on a drug dealer because the dealer had sold him meth instead of coke. The guy said that this was an ongoing issue and he had finally had enough. Yeah, those darn drug dealers, they always have the worst customer service. Obligatory, not a 911 dispatcher, but I live in northern British Columbia where seeing a moose and other wildlife is a pretty common thing. Anyways, we had an exchange student from some place that apparently never has seen wildlife before. A moose was apparently in her driveway and was happily munching on a tree. She freaked out and called 911 reporting a large four-legged Sasquatch was eating her tree. I mean really, she came on an exchange to Canada and had never even heard of a moose. So I know that there's a lot of Canadian viewers of this channel. Do you guys see moose very often? I know a lot of Americans see that as like a Canadian stereotype, as there just being moose everywhere. Kind of like Australia just having kangaroos everywhere. I'm not a dispatcher. However, I have a funny story involving my work and a 911 call. I work as a game master for an escape room company. We have a particular room that involves a phone, in which you need to input the correct phone number into it to progress in the room. It's not a real phone, but one of the players had said, "Dial 911." Their Apple Watch then dialed 911, and they apologized and said they were hostages in an escape room. Luckily, the dispatcher understood they were playing a game and not real hostages. For those wondering, if you input 911 into the phone in that room, it will say something along the lines of, "You were unable to make the call as dialed." I mean, now that I think about it, calling the police while you're in an escape room is probably the best cheat way to actually just beat the game really fast. Old woman called the non-emergency line, complaining that people were parked under the tree and it was killing her tree roots. I asked if they were parked in her yard. Nope, they were legally parked on the street. She started ranting and yelling. I passed it down the chain to the traffic sergeant. The crazy tree lady started calling daily. She never did get her no parking signs, mostly because of all the name calling. Who would have thought that if you're a little bit more civil with people, you're more likely to get what you want? Entered a 911 call from a gentleman stating someone was chasing him. He had no idea where he was, other than it was near the beach. I used the Phase 2 location from his cell phone to start officers while I tried to get more information. Because English was not his first language, and he seemed extremely panicked, he's in his vehicle, and another vehicle was chasing him. I heard sirens in the background, and asked him if he knew who was chasing him. He said yes, and it was the Border Patrol, and he was scared, and refused to pull over for them. I convinced him to pull over for one of my officers, and that was the end of it. Ah crap, there's a cop behind me. I need to call the police to pull over that guy to let me get away. 3 a.m., got a call about a suspicious vehicle outside of her house. I start getting the description, and get my officers en route when she said, "They're leaving." I get the direction they are headed, and relay it. I've got 4 officers converging like a net on this guy. Now that I've got a moment, I ask the woman, "What exactly did they do?" She replies, "They just stopped at the stop sign for a moment, and then they moved on." Ah, well, that's all for our crazy 911 call stories. Man, I gotta say, it's been really hard to record lately because of, just the insane allergies. I don't know what it is, but allergy season seems worse than ever this year for me. It's like in between stories, I'm constantly sneezing and rubbing my eyes and blowing my nose, and it's just it's difficult to get through it. But that's all for now. I'll see you guys next week.